So, good evening, everybody, and a really, really warm welcome to the inaugural lecture now in the Stephen A. Schwarzman Auditorium. Some of you will have already read that we've already hosted a small music festival in here and received no small praise also for the acoustics of the space. So we're really, really pleased about that. But tonight we'll test the auditorium in terms of a spoken event, as it were, here. And just to welcome you, my name is Axel Ruger. I'm the Anna Maria and Stephen Callan Director of the Frick Collection. And as I said, it's an incredible pleasure to have you here this evening. This is, of course, on the occasion of Vladimir Kanevsky's installation Porcelain Garden here at the Frick Collection. I trust, and I'm sure that you all have been through our wonderful, newly renovated and also expanded spaces in the mansion, and you will have noticed that there are flowers dotted throughout, and that whole installation done by Vladimir is really an homage to the flowers, albeit fresh flowers at the time, that were decorating the galleries throughout the building when the museum opened as a museum in 1935. And our two, Vladimir and Xavier, will be talking about all of that, and I'm sure a lot more. Please allow me to introduce the speakers briefly. Vladimir Kanevsky, our wonderful artist, born in Ukraine in 1951 and first educated actually as an architect. He immigrated to the United States 36 years ago, so I still have a long way to go, Vladimir. And shortly after his arrival, he really then began working actually on figurative sculpture and experimented really with a wide range of media, such as and materials, porcelain, bronze, ceramics, cement, plastics, but eventually really focusing on porcelain. And you see the fruits of that literally, as it were, in our galleries. And so he has been throughout his career working also with sort of flowers in various different constellations, as it were. And in these pieces here, he combines the delicate porcelain also with metal, and thereby continuing in this medium also the really hundreds of years of European tradition of flowers and flower displays. And so forth, while also paying really close attention to the anatomy of the plants. I will not really tell you much more about his practice because I'm sure that will come out in the talk. But Vladimir, we're really incredibly pleased that we have you here, and your display gets a lot of attention, and everyone wants to feel and smell the flowers as well. And the interlocutor, as it were, and our own colleague is, of course, many of you will know well, Dr. Xavier F. Salomon, the Deputy Director, and Peter J. Sharp, Chief Curator of the Frick Collection, who has really led many exhibition initiatives here, and also the reinstallation, of course, of the collection here at the Frick, after it had also been on holiday, as it were, at Frick Madison, and Xavier had worked on that installation and been leading that as well, and has been working with Xavier now on this. Of course, Xavier is known to many of you. I want to say he shot to even more fame during lockdown, as it were, through the cocktails with the Curator. Which then, along with our other colleagues who also dotted around the room, brought, of course, our works to light in the company of a cocktail, which is the perfect combination, obviously. Also, of course, he has been part in our renovation stories, as it were, but a few notable exhibitions of recent note that he has been working on was Nicolas Parti and Rosalba Carriera in 2023-24, and Tiepolo in Milan in 2019, which speaks to his, of course, expertise in 17th century Roman art and Venetian art. And he had previously, before he became chief curator here at the Frick, he has had a life before that at the Met across the street and the Dulwich Picture Gallery, and got his degrees too many to mention here, but ultimately the PhD also from the Courtauld Institute, and was named, and now I have to get this right because it is just such a good title, Cavaliere dell'Ordine della Stella d'Italia in 2018. So with that, I will once again welcome you, and please give a round of applause to our speakers, and enjoy the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Axel. Thanks to everyone here this evening. Thank you for being here at this inaugural conversation. I'll start a little bit setting the scene, but only a few days ago, someone came up to me who had been to the Frick and visited recently, and said to me, "Can you please give me the name of your florist?" And I said, "Absolutely, sure, but what do you need flowers for?" And they said, "Well, we came to the museum and saw these incredible arrangements of flowers." And I said, "Well, which event did you come to?" He said, No, it was just during opening hours." And I said, "Well, do you realize they're sculptures?" And the answer was no. As Axel has said, many people have been trying to touch and smell the flowers and the plants just to really make sure they're works of art rather than the real thing. But how did this come about? And Axel has mentioned our experiments in a way at Frick Madison, where with the wonderful curatorial team of this institution as a group, we brought some contemporary artists in, because the collection still is, I feel, and think this is very important, an inspiration and a source of inspiration for contemporary artists. So how can we reach different contemporary artists that work in different practices, that look at our collection and are inspired by them? When the museum first opened, and we need to go back almost a century ago, 90 years ago, on the 16th of December, 1935, we were all looking into that as we were thinking of reopening the museum for the second time. The museum had this 5-year closure period between 2020 and 25, longest in its history before the galleries, after the galleries, opened in 35. So what did they do in 35 to celebrate the opening? And of course, one thing we discovered from the archives is that they ordered flowers. And flowers, when you think about it, are these incredible natural objects, creatures, that are used by us human beings in all sorts of strange ways, for all sorts of strange reasons, but often to celebrate important events. The birth of someone, a wedding, a funeral. All of those things usually are accompanied by flowers, which seems like a very basic thing. But it really isn't. And when you go back to antiquity and you go back to other cultures, anywhere between the United States and Japan, Russia to Italy to Africa, flowers play a part in symbolism, in everyday life, and punctuating these important occasions. So our feeling was, how do we bring flowers in to celebrate the second opening? I mean, we could have got a florist to provide beautiful bouquets, which of course also happened, but we thought we need to do something a little more interesting than that. And I knew Vladimir's work. I'd known about it for a while from his presence, in the outer world, let's say, through collectors, online. And so I really reached out to him on a limb, just sort of saying, can we meet, and would you be interested in doing something with us? And that really started 3 years ago. So the process has taken 3 years. What you see has been 3 years of Vladimir's work and attention and envisioning this concept. And of course, the results are staggering. We're all absolutely thrilled. The flowers will be here for 6 months, so people can still enjoy them all the way into the fall. With fall, as you know, leaves start falling, snow start coming, flowers will reappear in the future. So this is meant to be a conversation between the two of us, talking a little bit about how this came about, what it is, about Vladimir's work, and I hope that all of you will have a much better sense of this project, its importance, its beauty, as we both speak about it. And of course, we have so many things to say that will hopefully be within the time allotted. But I'm just going to start with a very simple question, which is, why flowers? Why did you start with flowers? And can you tell us a little bit of your journey towards the flowers? Because that's not obviously how you started and what you did to begin with.
Yeah, I came across the flowers just was a strange occasion. It was I didn't know it will grow until this scale. And eventually, I started to understand why I was attracted to the flowers, why people like the flowers. As you mentioned, the cultural importance of flowers in life. Flowers are actually like a synonym for culture, because flowers are used in every side of our life. Actually, one little story. The Neanderthal burial was discovered, and they found traces of flower pollen in the burial. And it was immediately a theory that Neanderthals had culture because they brought flowers to the burial. It was enough to know the fact that they used flowers was enough to know that there was Neanderthal culture. Then this theory was disproved, but still still we know that flowers are very important.
We like to imagine they did have flowers in this.
Yeah, it was bees who did it. And apparently it's bees had culture. So, but actually it doesn't matter if it's correct hypothesis or not. The mere idea of flowers as the representative of a culture. And also the plants talk to us with flowers, literally, because they attract us, we cultivate them, and so it's mutually important for us. And so plants do everything possible for them to make them attractive for us. It's our aesthetics based on flowers. That's why they're so important. And I don't know any culture that wouldn't use the flowers. Probably this was attractive for me. Also, it was very important for me that there is certain engineering part of a flower in botany, certain algorithm in growing, structure, history of the flowers. Everything is very attractive for me because as an architect, I remember when I was a student of architecture, I was just sitting in the middle of a meadow looking at plants and flowers and everything, and it reminded me like really good architecture. And in my work in the sculptures, there is a lot of engineering. And I love it because engineering plus aesthetics plus art, it reminds me very much my first love, architecture. And it's practically the same thing, except for much fewer people who work on each piece. And what I hope to do is to create objects of sculptural, even architectural scale, something large.
So that gets me really to the next question, which is in a way your training. So you were born and grew up in Kharkiv in eastern Ukraine, but then you studied in St. Petersburg.
No. I fortunately I studied in Kharkiv. I became an architect and I built first in Kharkiv and then in Petersburg, yes.
So that training as an architect and the switch from that to sculpture, you've already sort of partly mentioned this, but what did that bring subsequently into the flowers? Because as you say, your sculptures are incredibly architectural. So how, you've already sort of mentioned some of that, but how did that all come about?
Actually, it was I wanted to be. I understood when I came to this country. I understood that it's too late for a serious architectural career. So I wanted to work as to be a figurative sculptor, and I started to sculpt people, and it was like separate career. I had exhibitions and everything that is needed for sculpture, but it's impossible to make living with figurative sculpture. Even if you are really famous, sometimes you have to teach or have some day job. So I decided I need a day job, and I tried porcelain, and so just to pay rent. And at first I didn't like it, and when I had studio visits from galleries, I usually I used to hide my porcelain in order not to offend the eyes of gallery people. And also I even signed porcelain with my first name, Vladimir, and I still do it. And I signed the sculpture with my last name. But at some point, it was probably connected to the scale. At some point, I made a couple of pieces that were larger in size and much more sophisticated because of that. And I felt that there was something in it. I felt that I can make art out of it. And eventually it started to grow, and I almost forgot my figurative sculpture, although I have...
You're still working in figurative
I
sculpture.
still do some figurative work, not very serious, but I hope to return to figurative sculpture also. But now I can, the thing is that I can tell whatever I want with flowers. It's just, the flowers is occasion to tell something bigger. So I'm kind of satisfied with this direction.
And of course, one other interesting thing, that builds from this human love for flowers is the human desire to replicate flowers. So based from a very simple, you find a beautiful flower, you pick it, you press it, and keep it in a book to preserve it, to depicting flowers in a number of different ways. And I was actually trying to work out what is the earliest depiction of a flower one can find. And it's most likely Egypt. There are these incredible reliefs in Luxor and Karnak about sort of flowers that are brought back from a campaign by the pharaoh who's conquered a certain area of Africa, and he's bringing back these flowers, and it's called the Botanical Room at Karnak, actually. And it has these incredible reliefs imitating flowers. But flowers appear in Egyptian frescoes, in Pompeii, in Herculaneum, in ancient Greece, and in many other cultures, in Japan, in China, in India. And then, of course, when you think about the Western world, people started painting flowers in still lifes. Think of all the great Dutch still lifes, Italian still lifes, French. Trying to have a painting in your home in Amsterdam, in London, in Paris, in Rome, of flowers out of season. I mean, we are so used to the idea that you can get almost any flower anytime now, thanks to a whole number of technological tricks and shortcuts. But in fact, human beings until recently had to follow the natural cycle of when flowers grow and where flowers grow. And so, of course, exotic flowers become really interesting. In Europe, people not only painted flowers, but started sculpting them effectively in every media you can imagine. I mean, there are papier-mâché flowers, bronze flowers, porcelain flowers, glass flowers. You can imagine any way, shape, or form down to Fabergé flowers, down to all sorts of other incredible examples. But when it comes to porcelain, it really starts in Vincennes in the 1740s. Vincennes is the previous manufactory of porcelain in France before Sèvres, which is a direct offshoot of Vincennes. And Vincennes and then Sèvres become very famous for producing these bouquets of flowers made out of porcelain and metal for the stems, which people buy to have indoor gardens when you cannot get flowers. So Madame de Pompadour is the most famous example of this, who just was a maniac of collecting these porcelain flowers, had them everywhere. Her house was just a garden all year round, and she also gave them to people as gifts. It was a sort of wonderful way of presenting flowers to other people, but porcelain flowers. Of course, when you look at that, you start realizing, the first reaction is often, okay, it's a bunch of flowers in a still life in porcelain. But then the more you look at it, if you have a little knowledge of horticulture and flowers, you realize that often you have different species that don't necessarily flower at the same time, that are not there in the same place. So still lives and these porcelain flowers are often fiction. I mean, they're trying to imitate real flowers. They're trying to be somewhat accurate, but it's not a scientific botanical depiction. So everyone is always commenting on how real your flowers are. And what we often joke about is how they're really not real, in the sense that there are a lot of changes and shortcuts that, you're an artist, you're a sculptor. You're not just trying to copy a flower for what it is.
Yeah, that's very interesting phenomenon. That they're not realistic, they're not botanically correct. Sometimes, for example, it so happened that when I made my first Morning Glory, for example, because of some reason, I didn't know flowers. I started making them without knowledge of botany. And because of some reason, I thought that they have pea pods on Morning Glory, which is funny. They do not. And I made them. And since then, everyone who commissions Morning Glory, everyone asks me to make pea pods there. And it's not only this. By the way, a very short remark about Madame Pompadour. I didn't meet her, but I read about her, and she put fragrance on porcelain flowers. And so the people who try to smell our flowers here, to a certain extent, they're right. So, and also to finish with Madame Pompadour, it was their flowers in Vincennes and later in Sèvres. Their flowers were not realistic at all. They were really seriously stylized and in painting in every respect. And they were they had kind of status of like jewels, and they sold them separately, and people bought them and ordered, or sometimes it's manufacturers bought them and mounted them on metal stems. So it's a European tradition that started even earlier, probably. For example, in 17th century, when they imported Chinese porcelain, not necessarily, not flowers, but vessels and vases and everything, they put them in metal kind of frame to probably to make them more Baroque, more Rococo, more fashionable for Europe. And also this relationship between the precious piece of porcelain and frame. Sometimes I used this this idea that metal part is like a frame for the precious porcelain. So it's old tradition, but my flowers pretend to be botanically correct. So it's still different. Also, the scale is different. And sometimes I can't imagine how, well, in some cases, people started watering our flowers. We had a client who bought our hollyhock. It was a smaller scale, and it was in steel container. It was beautiful steel container. And the lady, she called us and she said, it's rusty because of some reason. It started to rust. I'll return it to you. And we investigated the case, and the cleaning lady watered the flower. I can't imagine how she could.
So yeah, no, and this whole issue of how real something is, it's interesting what you were saying about Vincennes and Sèvres flowers, because I often overhear people in the museum, visiting in various places and seeing these sort of flowers and going, oh my God, they're so real. And there's really nothing real about them at all. But it somehow convinces you that they're these bouquets. And that is also true often of still lifes, where you have flowers that are just made up, that don't exist, or strange mixes, or things are out of proportion, or the wrong color, or the different color. And I know a number of other artists who also worked with flower themes and always change things and make changes. But staying in this field about the sort of tradition, you had an experience in 2012 where you worked at Meissen. So, we have obviously a very important group of Meissen objects. You've interacted with them in some way in this project as well. So how was that? How was working at Meissen with their porcelain?
Actually, it was like a dream. It was first dream. The second dream came true is here at Frick. But Meissen really invited us to create a show there in their museum, in their factory. And the idea of the show was I made a design of vases and then made flowers for those vases, and Meissen made vases. Vases pretty large. And it was absolutely incredible experience because I didn't know Meissen porcelain enough to make the design. I wanted to upkeep the tradition, even though the director general told me, "Oh, do whatever you want, just carte blanche." But I really wanted to make modern vases and at the same time traditional. So this task to make something modern and at the same time traditional, it's the same actually that I did here. And it gave me, I bought like 500 books on Meissen, started to look at them, and eventually, and I have to say they did a really incredible job creating the vases. And they made two of them, two of each. And one set was sent to our studio here, so we did. And working with them was really great, because great artists working there, and they were really, they really wanted to do something, something incredible, and they did. So it was great working with them, and to me it was really instructive. I learned a lot, and some of the techniques, which is rather interesting, some of the techniques that I kind of invented, found for me, myself, they did similar things, which was interesting. And the director general wanted me to make a master class to teach them. And I refused to do it because they knew a lot, and it wouldn't be appropriate if I teach them to do something. So this show happened, and It was a great experience. And when I met Mr. Henry Arnhold, whose collection is now at Frick, it was, we had some presentation in Manhattan. He came and we met and we started talking about Meissen porcelain. And I said that Meissen porcelain, the really valuable, really good Meissen porcelain is only 18th century. Even, I would say, first half of 18th century. And he said, yes. And so we talked. It was incredible experience talking with him. And then he invited us to his apartment to show the collection, because this collection was in his apartment. And he gave me, and he opened the vitrines, and he used to take a piece and give it to me, and my hands were shaking, even though I knew how to handle porcelain, obviously. So it was absolutely great to meet him. And by the way, he was the first. He told me when we were sitting, why don't you show it in Frick? And to me it was like, why don't we show it on Mars? And I didn't take it seriously, and it was a long time until Xavier's great vision of this show. I didn't believe it before that. So,
and it's, you know, the material of porcelain is such an interesting material because we are so used to it now. I mean, I would guess every single person in the audience has a piece of porcelain at home. That could be a vase, a dish, a set of dishes, something in your bathroom. Like, you know, and so much is such a common material. But we have to think that it wasn't always that way. And even though ceramics are as old as prehistory of, you know, ceramics of different kind, vase making, pot making, but, you know, there was a type of faience in ancient Egypt and in Rome, and then people, you know, really porcelain starts and develops in China as one of the great contributions of Chinese culture and art to the world. And Europeans are so obsessed with it that obviously they try to import as much of it as possible. It's a material that is inherently very durable but very fragile at the same time, which is this interesting, you know, kind of contradiction in a way. And it's such a fascinating material when you start looking at it and thinking about it, how you make it, how you fire it, how you can color it or not. And it's really Meissen in the early 1700s that discovers how to make this material in Europe. And from then it becomes an incredible history of industrial espionage, where every country in Europe is trying to steal the recipe for porcelain. And in fact, the first Meissen workers defect to Vienna, and the Dupaquier porcelain factory is created, soon followed by Vincennes, Sèvres in France, by the Buen Retiro in Spain, by Capodimonte in Italy, Chelsea in England, and so on and so forth. I think, you know, here at the Frick, I'm always amazed at the fact that actually one of the very first things Frick bought for his apartment when he was living in Pittsburgh, even before he built his house in Pittsburgh, was a Meissen vase. And that he probably just bought for purely, you know, decorative reasons, and that is now at the Frick in Pittsburgh. But then, you know, he didn't really buy porcelain until much later on in his life, where he bought effectively Sèvres pieces. And it's really thanks to people like Henry Arnhold, who gave us the incredible group of Meissen objects, and later Melinda and Paul Sullivan with the Dupaquier bequest, and Sid Knafel with his incredible collection of French faience, that our collection of ceramics and these sort of objects has grown substantially. Mostly, I would say, in the vessel area. I mean, we're talking about dishes, vases, containers of different kinds, some figurative, very few flowers. We have some flowers in Meissen which are in the Portico Gallery. But that has really made us a museum that has invested a lot in porcelain and thinking how porcelain works as a great material for works of art, amongst other things, and its historic importance. What I really love about Meissen today, and other manufacturers, Sèvres to some degree does the same, is that, first of all, they're still functioning, they're still producing things, still selling things, but that they involve contemporary artists to work in porcelain. And so any of you who goes to Meissen in Germany, you can actually visit the manufactory to some degree. They show you how the things are made, and there are often exhibitions of contemporary artists that are invited as artists in residence, as you were. And Sèvres, to some degree, does not quite as much as Meissen, but almost. The flowers are now at the Frick very visibly in that tradition, in a way that they interact with Meissen, with Dupaquier, with Sèvres. How did you feel about that as you were creating these objects? The idea that you are going back and forth in time. I mean, you're creating these objects today, but they're in conversation with things from 300 years ago.
Well, you mean the conversation with porcelain, or
with porcelain, I think, but then more broadly, yes, with the entire collection, with the artwork.
With porcelain, it was much easier. Actually, when I had this, started thinking about this task to make flowers, to make those objects for the museum that is established, interior and masterpieces on the walls and everything, it needed some reflection. What is the relationships between between everything, between the interior and flowers and my flowers, between the masterpieces and my flowers. As to the porcelain, it was easier because I had already had experience with connection with porcelain vase, for example, and a porcelain flower. We had the whole direction. We took old, valuable vases, for example, and made porcelain arrangements in those vases. So it was easier also because I had this really sentimental connection to it after we had this interaction with Mr. Arnhold. So it was easy, except for the technical. Technically, it was more difficult because I didn't have access to the vases themselves. So I had photographs, and I had the dimensions of the pieces, and I had to. And I have to say that porcelain flowers are heavy, so I needed to make them so that they wouldn't tip or. So that they would be stable inside of the vase. It wasn't trivial at all. It was, but aesthetically, what I did, first of all, it was important to guess what scale will be, how big a flower, how bright the flower, how will it interact with the whole collection. I didn't want to kind of dominate anything. It was. In general, in the whole collection, in whole installation, it was a difficult task to make scale, size of the flowers such that they're not lost in this interior, but at the same time they don't dominate. They kind of in ensemble with the whole thing. So, but it was a miracle. Everything, actually, I made. It was almost like a sketch. I made rough arrangements for the porcelain flowers, and I thought I would try them on and then make some changes so that they fit. I put them in, and they all fit. Like it was really, really. I would say it was strange. So.
And we should also say that so this project, as I mentioned before, has lasted 3 years. I mean, we first were in touch with one another 3 years ago to think about this idea. But you all have to think that 3 years ago, this building was a building site. The collection was at Frick Madison. Not all of it was on view. So when we were discussing with Vladimir, what to put in which room at the Frick, was a very abstract discussion because we couldn't go and check any of those spaces. So it started really with a virtual tour of the collection. And of course, Vladimir had been at the Frick many times before, but I think it's a different thing when you're visiting a museum to enjoy the visit, or when you're thinking, I need to make a sculpture of this size that goes in this place. So, technology in that case helped a lot, photos and things, and then we took measures of certain vessels that we used. Yeah. But I think there was also the very early discussion of, what do we do? Which flower for what room? How do we make that selection? And do you want to talk a little bit about that, about some of those choices?
With pleasure. Well, it was difficult. I didn't want to do anything like directly connected, like illustration to the painting, for example. But it was. I tried to do the connection, intuitive connection, and I have to say that. Can I ask Xavier to cover his ear because I'll be.
I'm scared.
For example, the two probably best matches, the pomegranate under in gold leaf room and artichoke. It was suggested by Xavier, and I immediately picked it up because it was perfect match. In case of the pomegranate, it was. I can explain what it's. The pomegranate is in Bible, and it's obvious. The connection is obvious, but not. But very good. So it was great, and but artichoke is completely intuitive. I cannot explain it. I cannot explain why it's so good, and. I made an artichoke before for the Hermitage. Oops, I'm sorry. Am I? Yeah. I made an artichoke for Hermitage, but it was completely different composition and everything. And when Xavier suggested that it would be good for the Bellini painting, it was immediately like flash. Also, by the way, one more. I actually had carte blanche about this. It felt like carte blanche, but it was at the beginning. It was a conversation when Xavier came to the studio, and we discussed the show, and he said, "We cannot do the exhibition for the living artist." And I remember I said, my wife will take care of it. But it was important. Let's do it as installation. And it was very important for me to understand, in conversation with Xavier, I understood, and it wasn't one conversation. It was like series of, sometimes it's like 2 sentences even. And I started to understand what is the difference between the exhibition and installation. For example, I remember when for the Fragener room, I wanted to make something white. There were garlands of roses already decided. But then I wanted to do, and I made a little, a smaller lilac, white lilac. Then I did the clematis, and I remember, one hyacinth. And I remember Xavier said, make 4 hyacinths. And it was. This is the difference between, you can do 4 hyacinths only for installation. If it's exhibition, it should be one. Otherwise, it's so in such small conversations, it's such small. And by the way, I remember it worked the other way around also, because I remember when I said we discussed the small pieces for the porcelain collection. And I said it shouldn't be symmetrical anywhere. It should be like surprises, little surprises. Someone goes and all of a sudden one. So it should be should have this quality of something temporary. In general, the whole installation should tell us that it's temporary, that it's not for a long time. It's not part of the collection. And such small details, they help me a lot. So you can uncover your
Thank you. No, and I think that discussion, you had an exhibition at the Hermitage in St. Petersburg in 2017, which unfortunately I didn't see in the flesh, but I've seen many images of it, and it looked spectacular in these grand, you can imagine, imperial spaces, rooms of this grand museum in Russia, where, of course, often the Russians are way more clever, and they actually had them all in vitrines, so no one was touching them or trying to smell them. So we decided, instead of doing that, to unleash the flowers in a way in the galleries. And so this distinction between exhibition, installation. Mm-hmm. So, but the problem is, once you install them, what we talked about, I think, very early on as well, was that you have this danger of making it into big bouquets of flowers on tables. And it becomes, they're all symmetrical, they're all kind of the same. You have a vase with this flower, that flower, the other flower. So how do you break that down? And also, how faithful do we want to be to matching specific works of art or not, or matching the list of flowers of 1935? So I always think the good result as a curator for these sort of things is to create a set of rules and then break them. So you do things, but you don't always do that thing. So I think there are two cases where you did replicate the flowers that were there in 1935, and those were the lilies of the valley in the Boucher room and the camellias in the library. So those are the flowers that we know were there. Mm-hmm. But when I remember one of the rules I put down, which we almost did stick to, I think, with a few exceptions, was that we didn't want to move any works of art. So the flowers have to live around and in the middle of the works of art, but we're not going to remove a sculpture or a piece from the collection to put the flower there, so that they're in between. So in the library, you have this great bull clock on a desk, and you could put 2 vases of camellias on each side. But if you do that, in a way, it just becomes a little boring. And so Vladimir came up with the idea of having a vase with a white camellia on one side and a branch of a red camellia on the other, without the vase. So you'll see as you go around that not everything is in a vessel. Some things are just the peonies in the West Gallery. And there are different solutions to that. And then some things also, I remember this was an early discussion, things on the floor, of just putting things directly on the floor. I wanted
to tell about this too. Well, first about the library, about the camellias. When I worked on it, talking about that, I made out of cardboard the model of this clock and the model of the table. And I made both camellias, the bouquet and potted camellia. I made it in this artificial model of freak, so that they interact with each other, the flowers and this. Now about the scale. At the first visit, when Xavier first visited the studio, I thought about a little exhibition, like 2-3 pieces, smaller and intricately made, but smaller. And Xavier came with this vision of installation all over the museum. And everything almost everything stands on the floor. And at first I was like stunned because it's really grand. And of course, any pedestals would look ridiculous there. It's impossible. But what is the difficulty of doing pieces on the floor? They should be human size, human scale, right? Because otherwise we should look at it like this. No, it shouldn't work. And like school geometry tells us that if we make an object twice as tall, the volume becomes like 8 times. 8 times. And volume means weight. So they become so, and some of them are like 3 times larger. So it becomes so heavy that I had to solve really serious engineering problems because there was my architectural background helped me a lot because, for example, metal fatigue. The flower is heavy and copper branch, and every time people go pass by, it a little bit vibrates, and eventually it just falls. So I had to decide all this. But the idea of making them large, it was like, it was the idea that made the show, the installation. So.
And we should say that I think in terms of matching with the paintings, there is one, I think, if I'm not wrong, which is the only one that is the same as the painting, which is the cherry blossoms with the whistler. Yeah. So it's as if the cherry blossoms are going into the whistler and become part of the painting. But for example, in the Fragonard room, the roses, which appear in all the Fragonards, are white roses, while in the Fragonards you have pink roses. So the idea of not having everything exactly the same. And I think, the idea of the artichoke came about with, just the thought of what kind of flower would you put under a picture like the Bellini, that it's so much about roughness, the desert. And, when we were discussing, the idea was like, do we do thistles? Do we do artichokes? It needs to be something like that. Right. It can't just be a bunch of roses or, a lily. And the pomegranate in the gold grounds, just because there is this tradition of using pomegranates in Italian Renaissance gold grounds. We actually don't have a single painting with a pomegranate in it in that room, but it's as if that you can imagine that it's there. And often people tell me, like, but you do have a painting of a Madonna with a pomegranate. And it's like, no, we actually don't. But it feels like we do. And I know we are sort of running out of time, but I wanted to talk as a last piece about the poppies in Mr. Frick's room. Because I still think that, and I don't want to finish on a sad note, but I think it's just a very beautiful homage.
A very interesting story. We did walk through. We went through a museum. It was still gutted and not finished, nothing inside. And we put every piece, like here will be roses, here, there. And it was the last room on the second floor. And I said, we didn't do anything. We didn't place any flower made of black porcelain. Let's make, and black porcelain, there it's like if you snap it, it's black inside. So it's, and it's very effective. Let's do black poppies, like large black poppies for this room. And Xavier said, you know that Mr. Frick died here. It was just coincidence. And so black poppies are there now.
So in a way, I feel like we've gone the full circle by, with your installation, your incredible installation. We're celebrating the rebirth of the Frick in a way. We're celebrating an important historical time for this institution, for this museum. But we're also in a way celebrating Mr. Frick in that room and a number of other figures, artists, artisans who created porcelain objects, people who created painting, sculpture around the museum. So I think the flowers, again, are providing the right accent. And I think the reaction of the public has been wonderful. And I'm very glad for that. So thank you, Vladimir, for this gift to us and to New York and to anyone who's visiting the Frick. And the only thing I would like to add for all of you in the public is that, obviously the show is open till the fall, so please come back, bring, your friends or anyone who wants to come and see the flowers. They're really remarkable. And there is a book that will be coming out. Usually we have exhibition catalogs, books that come out when the show opens. But as you can imagine, in this case, we wanted to include a lot of beautiful photos of the flowers in situ. So this means that the book is not going to come out till later in June. But there'll be still plenty of time for the book to exist in conjunction with the flowers in the building. So keep in mind that the book will be out, and I hope you'll all get copies of it. It's going to be fun. It's a short text and a lot of beautiful images. And so we'll have more coming your way in terms of programs also about Vladimir's creation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted... And I wanted to thank the museum and Xavier for trust, because I could do really a bad job, and they trusted me.
We're glad you didn't.
Me too. And so thank you for trust, and it was probably the best best collective that I worked. I had many shows everywhere. It was really a pleasure to work with the people of the museum. So thank you. Thank you, Xavier.
Thank you all. Thank you again for being here this evening. Thank you.